Hello everyone, welcome to Data Science Simple. My name is Sebastian. Today we will talk about classes in Python. But before we do so, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, also visit datasciencesimple.com where you will find other material that is going to be super helpful for you in your path of becoming a data scientist. Now, classes. So, a class is a block of code that has variables and functions, but what allows you to do is create objects, and these objects are going to have properties. And not only that, but the objects are going to interact between each other. Well, it is possible for them to interact. So let's jump into the notebook where I will show you a couple of examples. Okay, so we're going to start our notebook by importing random right here. That's just because we are going to generate a random number in our first class. So we're going to make a very simple class that's going to allow us to create objects which in our case are going to be cars, and our cars are going to have a make, they are going to have a color, they are going to have a year, and they're going to have a max speed. So in Python, a class is defined in the following way. You write the word class, space, and then you put the name of your class. Usually you start with capital. In our case, our class is going to be called car. Then you open close parenthesis, colon. Then usually what comes after that is the init function. And the init function is a reserved method in Python that allows you to initialize a class. In our case, we have dev underscore underscore init underscore underscore. Then you open close parenthesis and you start with self. Now, self represents the instance of a class. I know that doesn't make too much sense to you right now, but bear with me. It will make sense in a couple of lines. Now, then you put what arguments are you going to pass when you create the car. So, as I said before, our car is going to have a make, it's going to have a color, and it's going to have a year. Then, because it's a function, you do colon, you do indentation here, and then here in this line, we're doing self.may equal make. Here, we are telling Python that our car is going to have a variable called make, and that variable is going to be equal to whatever we are passing for make. Same for color. In the case of max speed, we are telling Python that the max speed of the car is going to be a random number between 50 and 200. And finally, the year of our car, it's going to be whatever we are passing for year. So that's our class. Now, the way you create an object using this class is the following. So we create a variable. In this case, it's called my car. And then we say that that's going to be equal to car, open close parenthesis. And we tell Python, it's going to be a Mazda, it's going to be blue, and it's going to be a 2005. So I'm going to run these lines of code. And then our car is created. Now my car is an object. And if you want to access the make, the color, and the year, and the max speed of the car, you only have to do mycar.make, mycar.color, mycar.year, and mycar.maxspeed. Let's see what we get. Pretty cool, right? So we have a Mazda, is blue, is 2005, and the max speed is 116, let's say, miles per hour. Now, we're going to move to a more sophisticated example where we're going to show how to create a vector using a class. So here we are defining our class vector. We have our init function that is telling Python that the x value of the vector is whatever we're passing for x, and the y value is whatever we're passing for y. Now, for now, we're just going to add one more function that's going to be the rep_r method. This is a special method, and this method is going to tell Python how do we want to represent our vector. So as you can see, we are returning a string, and it is open parenthesis, close parenthesis. On the other side is going to have two values separated by comma. And of course, the first value is going to be the x value of the vector, and the y value is going to be the y value that we are passing into our class. So I'm going to run this cell, and now here I'm going to define a vector. So I'm saying A is going to be a vector that is going to have the number 1 for the x coordinate and the number 3 for the y coordinate. And here I'm going to print it to show you how this function rep_r works. As expected, we get a vector 1, 3. All right, now I'm gonna show you how to add two vectors. So in order to do that, we're going to add a couple of functions to our class. So here we're going to define it again, class vector. This is what we had before. And now we're going to add two functions. One is the add function right here, and the other one is the sub function. Let's start with the add function. So here we're telling Python that the addition is going to be between self and other. This means it's going to be between two members of the same class, in this case vectors. And here we are defining an xval, which is going to be equal to the x coordinate of one vector plus the x coordinate of the second vector. In the same way, the y_val variable in this case is going to be equal to the y value of one of the vectors plus the y value of the second vector. And then we are returning self.class. This means that we're returning an object of the same class, in this case a vector, which is going to have for x value is going to have what we got for xval, and for the y value is going to have whatever we got for yval. In the same way, the sub function is very similar, with the only difference that we are subtracting here. So I'm going to run this, and now I'm going to show you something cool. Here we are defining our first vector, and here our second vector. And then we're going to print a plus b and a minus b. So these functions, the add function and the sub function, what they do is that they override the plus and minus operators in Python. Let's take a look at what we get. When we add it, we get the vector 4, 8, and when we subtract it, we get a vector -2, -2. Super cool, right? Okay, now let's move to our next subject, or our next example, where we're going to define the dot product between two vectors. The dot product between two vectors will give you a number, like 10, 7, 8. And the idea behind it is very simple. Let's say that you have a vector that is 2, 3, and a second vector that is 2, 2. When you do the dot product between them, what you do is 2 times 2 plus 3 times 2. That will be 10. So in our class vector, I'm going to rewrite it here. We have what we had before up to here, and now we're adding a new function, the mul function. And again, this is one of the magic methods in Python, which is going to override the multiplication operator. So we're telling Python here that our multiplication is going to be between two vectors, and the value that we want to create is going to be the x coordinate of the first vector times the x coordinate of the second vector plus the y coordinate of the first vector times the y coordinate of the second vector. And then we're going to return the value. So I'm going to run this cell, so Python knows the existence of our multiplication function in our class vector. And here I'm going to run this cell of code. So a plus b in our case should be 10. Let's take a look. Ha! Nice, right? Now, last thing I want to mention. Clearly, you can multiply a vector by a number. So for example, if we have a vector 2, 3, we can do 5 times the vector 2, 3. You can achieve that goal by using the R multiplication method in Python. So in this case, the operation is going to be between a vector and, in this case, a number. So we're going to define the x value, a variable called xval, equal to whatever coefficient we're passing here times the x coordinate of the vector. And again, the y value is going to be equal to the coefficient times the y coordinate of the vector. And then we're going to return self.class. And again, remember, this means that we're going to return a vector for which the x value is going to be whatever we're getting for xval, and the y value is going to be whatever we are getting for yval. So in this case, we have our vector here, 2, 3, and we are multiplying by 5. So we should get 10, 15. Alright guys, now you know the basics of classes. I hope you like this video, and I'll talk to you soon.